South Korean President Yoon departed today for Indonesia, where the ASEAN summit is taking place, to be followed by a trip to India for a G20 summit. On his agenda, stepping up multilateral cooperation with the region. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reportedly plans to travel to Russia this month to discuss weapons trade with President Vladimir Putin. Russia's defense chief says Moscow is also discussing holding joint exercises with Pyongyang. Consumer price growth at home in August jumped back to over 3% in 3 months. Extreme weather has pushed up the cost of agricultural products, while global oil prices remain high. It's September 5th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. President Yoon left for Indonesia today, where the ASEAN summit is taking place, followed by his trip to India for a G20 summit. On his agenda, stepping up cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region, while addressing North Korea's nuclear and missile aggression. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young starts us off.
President Yoon embarks on a diplomatic super week, travelling to Indonesia and India to attend key multilateral summits and at least 14 bilateral meetings with other world leaders. Yoon's first stop is Jakarta, where some 27 heads of government and international organisations are convening for the 3-day meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. After a dinner with Korean expats on Tuesday, the president will hold a bilateral dialogue with the 10-member bloc the following morning. He will build on the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, which he presented last November in Cambodia, as a key part of South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy that strives for freedom, peace and prosperity in the region.
President Yoon will attend the ASEAN-related summit in person for the second straight year. Our intention to pursue the Korean-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative in earnest will be clear, as we announce plans to strengthen cooperation in cyber and maritime security and digital innovation in particular.
Yoon will also attend the ASEAN +3 meeting, joined by Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Chinese Premier Li Qiang. As the rotating chair of the Northeast Asian trio, Yoon plans to address how to jointly fulfill the vision of the East Asian community through cooperation. Then, zooming on security issues on Thursday at the East Asia Summit, the president will ask world leaders for a strong response to North Korea's missile provocations and ongoing nuclear program by curbing its illegal financing schemes such as cryptocurrency stealing. Also, as part of his official visit to Indonesia, Yoon will hold a bilateral summit with his counterpart Joko Widodo at the presidential palace on Friday. A roundtable of major Korean and Indonesian corporate leaders will also take place during his time in Jakarta.
At this event, President Yoon plans to evaluate the achievements of economic cooperation with Indonesia so far and present cooperation plans for the next 50 years, including strengthening supply chains, responding to global agendas, and exchange of future generations.
With his itinerary extending to the G20 conference in New Delhi, Yoon will engage in further summitry on the sidelines of both multilateral meetings, with 14 bilaterals confirmed, including with India, and possibly 6 more, according to the top office. Marking the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations with both Indonesia and India this year, a presidential official said Monday that Seoul sees great potential for synergy in aligning their national interests amid growing geopolitical and ideological tensions in the region. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
This year, South Korea marks its 50 years of diplomatic ties with Indonesia and India, the hosts of the ASEAN and G20 summits. Now, these two countries have emerged as significant economic partners for Seoul. Our business correspondent, Shin Ha-young, tells us what to expect.
Indonesia and India, where President Yoon is traveling to for the ASEAN and G20 summits, have emerged as prominent markets amid the rapidly changing global economic landscape. According to the Korea International Trade Association, although the share of South Korea's exports to the two countries is not large, shipments to India rose by more than 20% year-on-year in 2022, while those to Indonesia recorded an increase of 18.6%. India, with a population of over 1.4 billion as of this year, is considered an attractive place for investment and as a production base. In particular, the Make in India initiative by the Indian government, which aims to make the country a manufacturing hub, has led global automotive companies to establish production facilities there. According to South Korea's trade investment promotion agency KOTRA, India is the world's fourth largest global manufacturing hub for vehicles. Both Hyundai Motor and Kia have successfully entered the Indian market through local investments. In 2021, in terms of sales volume in India's passenger car market, Hyundai ranked second with a share of 17%, while Kia came in fourth. Indonesia, on the other hand, is emerging as an economic partner in terms of supply chains and economic security, especially in the electric vehicle and battery sectors. The government and state-owned firms are working on building supply chains, starting with the mining of nickel, a key material for EV batteries, to the production and distribution of batteries. With India and Indonesia both marking their 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties with South Korea this year, economic cooperation is expected to expand in various areas. KOTRA sees EVs and renewable energy as promising areas of demand for both Seoul and New Delhi. The Indian content market, which is expected to reach $31 billion by next year, is also a field that South Korea can focus on. With Indonesia, electric vehicles, battery supply chains, as well as its smart city projects are areas that South Korea can look forward to for further cooperation. 신하영, Arirang News.
As Russia seeks more weaponry for its war in Ukraine, a U.S. media report says North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is planning to travel to Russia this month for weapons talks. Eyes are now on whether Kim and Putin will be able to meet for the first time in 4 years and what impact this will have on the region. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peun-ji has more.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may travel to Russia as early as next week to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss the possibility of supplying Russia with more weaponry and other military cooperation. Citing American and allied officials, the New York Times reported Monday local time that Kim would likely travel from Pyongyang, probably by armored train, to Vladivostok, where he would meet with Putin. U.S. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson also confirmed Monday that Kim is expected to visit Russia to discuss arms sales with Putin, and that the visit is widely anticipated to take place this month. She added that Kim expects leader-level diplomatic engagement with Russia, following Moscow's attempt to convince Pyongyang to sell artillery ammunition for its war in Ukraine. U.S. officials said in return, Kim would ask Russia to provide North Korea with advanced technology for satellites and nuclear-powered submarines. It would be the first foreign diplomatic activity for the North Korean leader in 4 years. Kim last met Putin in April 2019, then met China's Xi Jinping 2 months later, in June. Since January 2020, the North isolated itself for 3 years during the COVID-19 pandemic. One expert noted that this comes after the historic summit last month between the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan at Camp David, where the three countries agreed to strengthen security ties.
Overall, I think they will strengthen the three-way relationship between North Korea, China, and Russia. South Korea, the U.S., and Japan have already agreed to build a new trilateral security framework. So this is going to make the conflict between the liberalism bloc and totalitarianism bloc more obvious.
As for the reason why the U.S. government confirmed details of Kim's possible visit to Russia, he said it's probably to raise awareness, to call on the international community for stronger cooperation, in order to block illegal arms trade between Pyongyang and Moscow. The New York Times also said U.S. officials have, at other times since the war broke out in Ukraine, released declassified intelligence to try to dissuade North Korea, China, and other countries from supplying Russia with weapons. It also reported that officials say White House warnings about planned transfers of North Korean artillery shells stopped previous cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Peun-ji, Arirang News.
While attention is on Kim's potential trip to Russia, there are also signs that North Korea, Russia, and China may conduct combined military drills for the first time, apparently against joint drills by South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung with more.
Growing speculation that North Korea, Russia, and China may conduct their first ever joint military exercises is bound to spark concern in the international community. On Monday, Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu revealed that Moscow is considering joint naval exercises with Pyongyang and Beijing. On the same day, South Korea's National Intelligence Service reportedly confirmed that Russia formally proposed a joint drill with China during Shoigu's visit to North Korea in late July.
There was an answer from the National Intelligence Service saying that Russian Defense Minister Shoigu likely proposed a three-way exercise between North Korea, China, and Russia when he met with Kim Jong-un.
Regarding the potential drills, Seoul's defense ministry said Tuesday that it will pay close attention.
Our military will keep a close eye on the matter, including movements related to the North Korean military.
Speaking to a Russian news agency last week, Moscow's ambassador to North Korea reportedly raised the need for trilateral joint drills between Pyongyang, Moscow, and Beijing. The ambassador said military drills would be an appropriate response in light of constant trilateral exercises by the U.S. and its allies. South Korea and the U.S. last week wrapped up their Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise, which is often strongly denounced by North Korea. Choi Min-jang, Arirang News.
Consumer price growth in Korea last month jumped back to over 3% in 3 months. Extreme weather has pushed up the cost of food items while global oil prices remain high. Our An Sung-jin explains.
Amid rising fruit prices due to extreme heat and rain, consumer prices in South Korea in August saw their biggest hike since April. According to Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, saw a 3.4% increase in August, compared to the previous year. That's the largest on-year increase since April. It is also a 1.1 percentage point increase on July's figure, making it the largest on-month increase since September 2000. The rise in food prices has been the biggest contributor to inflation. Fruit prices in particular were up by 13.1% on-year, which was the biggest rise since January 2022.
The Consumer Price Index, excluding volatile categories such as food and energy that include petroleum and agricultural products, which can rise due to temporary factors, saw the same on-year increase of 3.3%.
The same official added that the fact that core inflation measured by excluding volatile categories was at the same level as last month indicates that a change in consumer prices in August was due to temporary factors rather than a shift in the overall price trend. However, one expert noted that caution is needed.
Although it is a relief that the core inflation isn't expected to increase more, it's different from consumer prices as a rise in prices for agricultural and petroleum products is influential to consumers, like how the end of fuel tax cut can sway prices in a few months.
It seems that the government will have to balance tax revenues and consumer sentiment.
The overall slowdown in prices is being maintained, and as temporary factors ease, prices are expected to stabilize again from October onwards. The government will remain extremely alert to stabilize prices.
This aligns with government measures as it announced its efforts to ensure a lower price of key Chuseok food items for consumers while providing subsidies. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The South Korean economy managed to keep up in the second quarter, only to expand 0.6% as imports fell greater than exports. Our Park Gon-woo has the details.
South Korea saw slight economic growth in the second quarter of 2023, despite an overall decrease in exports and imports. Preliminary data revealed by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday showed that real gross domestic product increased 0.6% in the second quarter compared to quarter one. That figure was identical to the bank's forecast in July. Despite export increases for chips and automobiles in the April to June period, total exports fell 0.9% on quarter, while imports were down 3.7%, mainly due to a decrease in shipments of oil and gas. Private consumption, government consumption, and investments all shrank in the second quarter, while investment in facilities, including investment in machinery, was the only category that saw growth. South Korea had seen positive on-quarter growth for 9 consecutive quarters, beginning in the third quarter of 2020. That is until the country slipped into negative growth in the last quarter of 2022. Growth was back in positive territory in quarter 1 of 2023, on the back of a small rise in private consumption.
The economic growth is projected to continue improving as consumption will rise, and sluggish exports will ease in the future as well.
The official also added that uncertain factors such as China's slower-than-expected recovery and concerns of the U.S.'s additional tightening policies still remain. And according to the central bank, South Korea's real gross national income fell 0.7% on quarter in the second quarter, which was mainly attributed to worsened terms of trade. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
The Ministry of Education has taken a step back in its handling of teachers who took part in Monday's nationwide protest rallies. Education Minister Lee Ju-ho said Tuesday that teachers who took part in the rallies would not be punished by the Education Authority. He added that the majority of the teachers took days off from their schools to mourn the death of colleagues. The ministry had previously ordered teachers to remain in schools, saying those taking part would be punished. The organizers said over 120,000 teachers took part in Monday's protests. They mourned and commemorated fellow teachers who had taken their own lives and demanded law changes to improve teachers' rights. Starting today, lawmakers at the National Assembly are quizzing government officials on a range of issues that'll last until Friday. It's one of the major events scheduled for the final regular session of South Korea's 21st National Assembly. On day one, it was all about political issues. We take a closer look into what's in store during this final assembly with our political correspondent, Lee Si-hoo. Thanks for coming on, Si-hoo.
Hi, Jung-min.
Hi. And I hear this 100-day session holds exceptional significance for the lawmakers. Why is that?
Well, the next 3 months are crucial in that they are the Parliament's last chance to pass some of its most pending bills, sort out any unfinished business, and make a lasting enough impression to ultimately secure seats at the general election. Right now, the Parliament has a minority ruling, majority opposition status. The ruling People Power Party holds approximately 37% of seats, while the main opposition Democratic Party holds 56. This has led to fierce clashes and standoffs during the legislative process, where the opposition would use their majority to pass bills that would later be vetoed by the president. For example, the revisions to the Grain Management Act and the Nursing Act. For the ruling party, the election is an opportunity to create the momentum and support that the Yoon administration needs to carry out its national tasks. For the opposition, it's a chance to maintain their voice.
Right. And the rival parties are vowing to put people's livelihoods first and foremost. Tell us more about that.
Yes, both the ruling and opposition parties said they will prioritize pushing bills related to people's livelihoods and the economy. Take a listen.
The PPP will focus on reviving the economy and taking care of people's livelihoods. We will thoroughly deny false agitations, prevent financial leaks, and normalize the national finance.
As the party that overcame the currency crisis and propped up the venture economy, we will restore the public economy through our 3 policies focusing on domestic consumption, investment, and growth.
The PPP will also push for reforms in labor, education, and pensions. Some of its legislative goals include supporting the launch of the Korea Aerospace Administration and allowing anonymous births to protect the mother and the infant. It's also pushing to postpone the enactment of the Fatal Industrial Accidents Punishments Act for small businesses. The act punishes business owners for fatal accidents occurring at their workplace. Now, the DP recently announced 7 legislative goals on top of countermeasures regarding Japan's release of the Fukushima wastewater. The party aims to push bills protecting workers working in extreme heat, as well as protecting teachers from being falsely accused accused of child abuse. It's also pushing for bills to help small and medium-sized businesses by facilitating investment.
A lot to work on. And Shihu, on top of that, what other events are we expecting?
Well, as you mentioned earlier today, starting today, the lawmakers are quizzing the government officials during the parliamentary Q&A sessions. Every day, about 12 different lawmakers are going to question the government on topics such as politics, diplomacy, security, the economy, education, and society. Some of the expected topics to come up are Japan's release of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant, teachers' rights, and response measures to violent crimes. Now, in October, the annual parliamentary inspection of the government will take place. Each parliamentary committee will conduct inspections in their respective fields of expertise. Now, the rival parties will also discuss and review the budget proposal submitted by the government.
And with about 7 months remaining until the general elections, what can you tell us more about the parliament's goal to complete and achieve electoral reform?
Yes, so Speaker Kim Jin-pyo said that all reforms to the electoral system must be completed by the end of this month. He said that way we can ensure people's political rights and offer a fair chance at competition for new politicians. The lawmakers are also discussing measures to possibly combine electoral districts in new ways rather than the traditional boundaries drawn by provinces and regions.
This way, our politics is making a stepping stone to overcome regionalism, a deep-seated problem in our society.
Speaker Kim is also pushing for a constitutional amendment that will decrease political clashes and divisions and instead facilitate conversations and compromises.
If the starting line of decentralization and cooperation is electoral reform, the finish line is a constitutional amendment. Now that the rival parties have taken the first steps of conversation and compromise, let's gather our strengths to achieve agreement on constitutional amendment.
Beginning this week, the Parliament's Advisory Committee for Constitutional Amendment and Political Policies is holding public hearings to find people's opinions on ways to improve our political system.
All right, we will have to keep an eye on how it all unfolds. Thanks for that, Shihu.
Thank you.
Unseasonably warm temperatures will continue for the next few days. Highs will stay near 31 degrees Celsius until Thursday. With high moisture levels in the air, temperatures will feel a couple degrees higher than the actual readings. But tropical nights will subside with lows dropping below 25 degrees. Heat wave alerts have been expanded to further parts of inland regions. Along with Chungcheongdo provinces and southern regions, parts of the Seoul metropolitan area are under heat wave advisories. Chances are high that they will stay in place for most regions tomorrow. For Gangwon-do province, where cold easterly winds are blowing, longer spells of showers are expected. For eastern Gangwon-do province, 5 to 10 millimeters are in the forecast. For Jeollado province, scattered outbreaks of rainfall of 5 to 40 millimeters are expected. Under sunny skies, Seoul and Busan will be starting off at 23 degrees. Daytime highs will be in the similar range tomorrow. Seoul will get up to 31 degrees, Gwangju 28, Gyeongju will be topping out at 28 degrees. And clear skies are expected for the time being with wide temperature gaps. For the remainder of the week, highs will hover around 30 to 31 degrees Celsius. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's lying? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
연기를 하면서 뭐가 너를 가장 행복하게 하니, 너의 본질은 무엇이니 라는 거를 자꾸 들여다보다 보니까 쓸데없는 욕심이 많이 털렸다. 그게 제가 연기하면서 얻은 가장 큰 소득이 아닐까. 저는 발레리나 출신 영화 감독 겸 배우인 강예나입니다.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? I'm live!
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들.
아무리 봐도 없지. 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
On Wednesday, the World Smart City Expo will kick off here in South Korea. This is its 7th edition, and it will focus on the theme Smarter City, Brighter Future. It will feature a range of technologies for safe and livable cities and includes notable elements like the WSCE Mayor's Forum, Hydrogen City Pavilion, and others. There will also be conferences in various fields such as government-to-government cooperation meetings with the Netherlands, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, Japan, and others, as well as conferences on data, finance, and governance, along with one-on-one business consultations totaling more than 50 diverse programs. According to the organization behind the event, it's set to attract around 20,000 visitors from 200 cities in 60 countries. The government says this event will be an opportunity to spread Korea's smart city technology to the world and expects it will be also an opportunity to promote the overseas expansion of related companies. So what is a, quote, smart city, and why is it so important to gather leaders in the field at one place? We have two experts with us in the studio today. First, we have Andrew Lim, Research and Innovation Attaché at the Government of Quebec. Welcome.
Thank you for having me again.
We also have Jonathan Albrecht, the COO of ISIS. Welcome to you as well.
Welcome for having me tonight.
So I wanted to start with you, Mr. Albrecht. So what is the significance of this World Smart City Expo being here in South Korea? I know you're not based here, so you're also, temporarily here. So what's the significance?
There are many, actually. One of the most important for South Korea is obviously to provide an opportunity for the country to showcase its technological prowess that they did over the years. There is also the promotion of sustainable urban development, along with fostering international collaboration like we have right now with Quebec, Canada, and Korea. And also, it can have a significant positive effects on the economy, innovation ecosystem, and also urban planning strategies here in Korea.
That's right. And now, Mr. Lim, how does a city, so I want to talk about the definition of smart city as a whole. How does a city transition from being a conventional city to a smart one? Or does it have to be built from the bottom up? And how long does it take for a city to become smart?
Well, that's a very comprehensive question. So first, I would like to define smart cities. I mean, people have heard of this term for a long time. It started with ubiquitous city, now it's smart cities. So people wonder, what is smart cities? So basically, the basic definition is using data, using technology to serve urban problems. I mean, cities have a lot of problems, waste management, traffic, they have problems with labor shortage, etc. So smart city is to use technology, IoT sensors, data, AI, etc., to kind of take that data and solve these problems with tech. But the transition now is, rather than having the tech be at the forefront, they want to kind of put human behavior, or quote unquote, they call it human-centric smart cities now. So what they want to do is, instead of just having the tech out there to try to solve, first we have to really see human behavior. How is this actually impacting their lives, their neighborhoods, their environment, etc.? So that's kind of what the definition of smart city is, but they're transitioning from, rather than a tech-driven, to more like bottom-up driven. So some of the key transformations that people are seeing these days is, of course, everybody knows AI. I mean, smart cities have been there, automated vehicles, 5G, all that, but with ChatGPT and all the new technologies from AI, I think that's really transforming smart cities. What I mean by that is, like ChatGPT, the algorithm to learn about data and have it transform and actually have generative data and have actual results from that. I think that is a big transition. So, for example, smart cities, you get a lot of data from, for example, IoT sensors. And back then, with that data, they would look at it and they would try to see what the problem is and kind of solve it out themselves. But nowadays, with AI, they could put the actual data inside, and like ChatGPT, they would actually spit it out. Of course, it takes a lot of data, lots of training, machine learning, all that. But with algorithmic technologies like ChatGPT that could actually utilize AI and have like CCTVs for traffic management, things like that. So like AI, you could type like ChatGPT, how can I reduce traffic at this certain time, at this certain moment, or how can I reduce carbon emissions? So with training, AI would tell you, like ChatGPT, you have to, I don't know, change the traffic signal from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, this kind of transformation. And I'm really, really looking forward to this transformation, actually.
Right, and I wanted to ask you, he's already touched on it because your company has a lot to do with IoTs. So let me ask you, what are some essential technology? I know Andrew has already touched upon it, but if you go down to the real details, what are some core technologies that a smart city must acquire in your view? Well, I can think of 3 right now that are extremely important. And one is connectivity and connection and communication infrastructures, because we need, well, not we need, but the country, for example, or any country, they need to have a solid and reliable network to gather any data, do real-time monitoring, and be able to having some good communication between devices and systems. And also, for example, with our company, we're in the IoT industry, sensors. It's extremely important to collect and gather those crucial data for many applications, like, for example, environmental monitoring and weather prediction, traffic management, waste management, and also energy efficiency. And finally, we have been talking a lot recently about smart mobility, and using AI solutions to analyze all sorts of data can help reduce congestion, can improve transportation efficiency also, and promote at most the sustainable mobility options. And so you were talking about all these different technologies. I know your expertise is in hardware as well. So what's the typical time frame for all these things to be implemented in a city, you say? Well, there's no real answer for that, obviously, because it depends on the complexity of the project. But regarding a city, for those kind of projects inside a smart city, it can depend on the size of the city, its budget, also if there is any political support, for example. But also one thing that has to be in consideration is technology changes rapidly. So cities have to take that into consideration and accelerate their decision-making process just to make sure that they can use the technology at the right time for the right purpose. Right. Now, Andrew, you've been in Korea for quite some time, so you've been to different cities. And we're talking about all these different things that make a smart city. Which cities do you think within the country really reflects the definition of a smart city so far?
Well, I don't want to sound biased, but I do live in Seoul, and Seoul is the capital city, and obviously with their population and budget size, I would say Seoul metropolitan government does have one of the best smart cities technologies in Korea, but actually I think the world. One of the key issues, it's kind of the past, but still, the untact movement, coronavirus, all that stuff. So they just somewhat recently launched the Metaverse Seoul. You probably heard of this. It's basically providing essential public services online. Yes, we had some of that before. You probably know there's some kiosks around the subway station where you could get document registration, et cetera, et cetera. But this metaverse really helps the vulnerable. Maybe you need some birth certificate, but you cannot leave the home for whatever reasons, like maybe for health reasons. You could log in, actually create an avatar, authenticate yourself, and get this birth certificate by PDF, for example. So this kind of cool technology is, I think, Seoul makes it really advanced. But some of the key ones that I'm really following these days is, I'm sure you know, Korea and other countries, advanced countries around the world, they have their birth rate issues. But also, more importantly, there's a lot of elderly population. So Seoul, and I guess Korea and other countries around the world, like Canada and Quebec as well, we also have a large elderly population. So they coined this term, silver care. So they have a lot of smart city technologies to help the elderly. So it could be, for example, having IoT sensors in their power plug to show how their electricity consumption is normally. But let's say they're using very little electricity. Then perhaps there's some reasons for that, health reasons, maybe fainted, had a heart attack. So then the IoT sensor would alert the proper authorities like the district office. So they would give them a call. And if there's no answer, maybe they would have a policeman actually knock on the door and maybe save some lives. That's one really cool technology. But what I really think is really cool is, like I said, tech is cool, but you need that human-centric, component to it. So yes, IoT is all good, but quite often there's this, what we call the digital divide. Smart cities, apps, IoT sensors, all that. But I'm sure we know the elderly, they're not as familiar with these technology. So there's a lot of work being done in this area. For example, the Seoul Metropolitan Government works with agencies like the Seoul Digital Foundation, where they actually have capacity building programs for the elderly. But what's interesting is, yeah, I've heard of elderly training, but they're very in tune to what the elderlies need. So they actually use other elderly people to train the elderly. Because let's say, for example, you have some young people train the elderly. And I'm sure within the Confucius society and all those cultural reasons, maybe they're a bit shy. Maybe they think, oh, this young person is kind of looking down on me because I don't know tech. But if you have a fellow senior citizen teaching a fellow senior citizen, you kind of mitigate these impacts. And this is what I mean by tech is very important, but you need that human-centric aspect. And this is what I mean by this transition.
Right. And sometimes you don't know where we can apply the tech, and after we develop it, right? And then we find the use for it. So now, building on from that, how credible is South Korea in terms of building a smart city? I ask because the government wants to utilize this World Smart City Expo as a stage for diplomacy, more exchanges from Korean cities to the rest of the world. So how credible is it? I know you're from the government of Quebec, so maybe you're the perfect person to ask. How credible do you think the government is?
So that's a great question. I mean, smart cities, the government, diplomacy, these things are very important. So in terms of the actual event, the World Smart Cities Expo, it's of course run by the government, MOLIT, Ministry of Land Infrastructure Transport, Ministry of Science, etc. And they understand smart cities. It has a lot of components that may be difficult for international collaboration or for credibility. Because smart cities, you have to always, kind of hype it up to get people on board, etc. So there's a lot of questions about these kind of legitimacy. And for Korea, how they've kind of started to use smart cities as part of their diplomatic kind of leverages, they use it a lot for ODA. I'm sure you probably heard official development assistance. So there's many examples of this working with KOICA and other government agencies. For example, one of the recent successes is T-Money. I'm sure you know the T-Money card you use on your subway or even convenience stores. It actually works in some of the other countries like Colombia now. As part of the ODA program, they did this a couple of years back. So they helped Colombian citizens not use always, like coins and paper anymore. Now you could actually, I heard you could actually take the T-Money card here and use it there. Of course, you have to charge in their own currency, but things like that. So Korea has been trying to legitimize through a lot of their ODA programs, because that's an obvious reason, because you would help their social challenges. However, there are smart cities. There's not always successful cases. For example, Seongdo can be seen as a success, but also a lot of people see it as a failure case where they built it, but people didn't really come because they had bigger expectations for Seongdo, but it's still somewhat empty. The public transportation isn't there, et cetera, et cetera. So there is some legitimacy problems. But I think Korea is still trying to really leverage their smart cities, their tech, their know-how. Korea is kind of having the spotlight. So that's why they have a lot of these events. And as Jonathan mentioned, a lot of countries are coming. We're also involved as well. I'll be speaking at the 7th Local Smart Cities Council, where there's a lot of local governments that'll come, and I'll talk to them about Quebec Smart Cities prowesses, but also talk about how we could actually collaborate. Government funding, data sharing, although that can be quite sensitive. For example, maybe Korea's a bit better at hardware, but maybe Canada, Quebec's a better at software. So you kind of put that together. So that is kind of part of my job, and that is why we're being involved in this event.
Right, and it's important to bridge the companies together through this stage. Right, right. Now, Jonathan, so South Korean government has been actively removing so-called killer regulations that kind of stymie the development of certain companies, and I'm sure you have first-hand experience as a COO of a hardware company. So can you give us some examples where regulation has hindered technological advancements in terms of developing a city? Well, the best example that I have right now in mind is about startups and small businesses. I can see how easy now it can be to have a company running in South Korea. They reduced a lot of the bureaucratic hurdles, and so that helps a lot. Also in terms of registration process, taxation, they also allow us to have access to some fundings, which interestingly enough promotes entrepreneurship and the economic diversification as well. So that's quite interesting and extremely interesting for us. Also, because South Korea is in what I say a technological boom, it has becoming a really important tech hub for startups, for tech startups. And so this is also obviously one of the reasons for a Quebec company like ours, specialized in electronics and in IoT precisely, to come to Korea to benefit from this extremely interesting market for us. But also in terms of telecommunication regulations, for example, it has also been modified recently, all those regulations, in order to roll out this 5G network and to benefit even more about being able to telecommunicate more, to have better real-time monitoring, basically to have better access of information, which is very, very important. And also, for the financial sector, there has been in place a regulatory sandbox, which has helped to develop a better digital banking system, like, for example, the T-Money card, as he was mentioning earlier, which encourage also competition and innovation. And that I found that it's quite interesting that South Korea is moving forward in terms of removing those so-called killer regulations and to make it more easily for their citizens to have a better life. Right, right. And you talk about the sandbox, right? So there are some examples that innovative regulatory approaches, implemented in new cities will boost the companies. You've already touched on it, but could you maybe reiterate the importance and give us more examples? Sure, sure. Yeah. It's no secret that in more cities right now are into developing autonomous vehicles, and that's the case, for example, in a city in Chandler, Arizona, the United States. They have they have given more access to Uber, for example, to create some kind of autonomous an autonomous vehicle to allow passengers to freely enjoy their rides. So that's one example. Another example is I will take in Quebec, Montreal City. It has become what I call an AI city. They have given many opportunities to big companies such as Microsoft and Facebook to open their lab, giving them access to funds to allow them to create like such hub in Montreal, which is absolutely amazing. And also here, more in Korean cities, and I will take Seoul as example, they have created POC programs,
proof of concept.
Proof of concept, thank you. So they have created proof of concept program within their districts, and we're part of some of those programs that we're benefiting, which is absolutely amazing. And also, finally, another point that I found really interesting is since the pandemic, it gave so much opportunities for people to work remotely that some cities like Barcelona, Bangkok, for example, they have developed a digital nomad visa, which allow their country to benefit from for different reasons, and the economic reason is one of them, because they can diversify through the help of many people coming from many countries. So that's what I found really interesting about those. Right.
And you know, you've been across the world and you've seen certain examples. Now, I wanted to talk about the future with both of you guys. Andrew, start with you. What is the future direction of smart cities, and what advancements or features do you foresee in the next generation? Some things that we can't expect yet as normal citizens. Maybe an expert, you know, can give us a little hint on what to expect.
So, I mean, future, who knows? But from my point of view, you've probably heard this a lot, data is the new oil. So yes, I mentioned AI as well. There's a lot of data to be had from smart cities, IoT sensors, CCTV, all that. But one could also see it could be limiting. If you talk about like ChatGPT, that scoured the entire internet for several years to actually obtain that data. That's why it's actually able to generate the text and that kind of transformative information. So in terms of smart cities, I think data will be the new oil, like that'll be a key part of the AI. But why I mention data is because if you think about smart cities, yes, lots of data, but maybe it's not enough. So a new emerging tech is coming where we call it synthetic data. So we use AI to create synthetic data to feed the AI, like another type of algorithm to do the machine learning, to be able to have enough information to actually, be useful. So I think synthetic data is a new trend that's actually coming out. Another big one is actually quantum technology. Probably people have heard of quantum tech, but they're like, what is that?
Well, I mean, we have Oppenheimer,
yes,
right?
Yes,
so
that's true.
A lot of people have heard quantum, but yes.
So quantum tech, I mean, I'm not going to go through it in too much detail, but basically it is very advanced computing tech, for example. It could do calculations that a conventional computer might take years, thousands of years. So for obvious reasons, it's very sensitive. So in terms of, because of diplomacy, geopolitics, all that stuff, quantum is a new field that is actually emerging, but it's a very important field that the Canadian government, Quebec, but also Korea has announced. President Yoon announced their quantum strategy quite recently. Hence, we actually have a quantum delegation from Canada coming in November and one from Quebec coming next year, February. So why are they coming? It's very simple. Advanced, like-minded countries, due to the geopolitical ramifications these days, we have to work together, especially in sectors like quantum computing, because we need a lot of data, we need a lot of expertise, because quantum technology has been around, well, you probably heard here and there, but it's still in its nascent stages. So like-minded countries, but especially governments, need to continue to fund, continue to innovate so that it actually booms and changes the world. So just to make a last point. So for Quebec, what they did was they created something called innovation zones. So I think there's a little bit of a trend in other countries in smart cities. They create a zone actually to kind of agglomerate some of the tech companies, research centers all together. So in, for example, quantum tech, in Quebec, there's an area called Sherbrooke. There's a university there. They're putting startups, they're putting supercomputing, all that, to put all the quantum players there so that they kind of work together and actually, bring about hopefully some commercial successes later in the year.
Right, and Jonathan, would you like to add something so that normal citizens don't really know, but what we can expect from a smart city, from our living?
Obviously, it's improving the life of people. So, and being an avid fan of technology, obviously, I jump into any occasion to improve my situation, and so. Obviously, like Andrew mentioned, we have to rely a lot on data. Data is extremely important. And over the years, every kind of data that we were able to collect, then it's helping us a lot right now to create ChatGPT, to have access to all the possible knowledge in the world in the palm of your hand, and so that's what I think it's amazing, and I'm sure it's going to continue improving in that sense.
And we don't know what's going to be coming.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, I can speak to you for hours about this, but that's all the time we have for today's edition. Mr. Lim and Mr. Albrecht, thank you for joining us this evening, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Now that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.